Lots of writing on this story. Brendan, where do you want to start? What caught your eye?
I suppose the front page of the Sunday Times, Joe. The figures are always kind of mind-blowing with these things, and Paul Rowan and Mark Tighe have a piece on the front page of their paper. Towards the end of it, it's the figures that really jump out. And they say that even after the scheduled exit fee for Mick, the FAI budgeted for its overall international management teams, including the under-21s, to cost 1.19 million in 2021. The figure for 2019 was 3.19 million when Martin O'Neill was coach and his management team received significant termination fees. So just in that one snapshot, you see exactly what's happening here. The backstory of where the FAI is at and where it's come from doesn't need any more exploring at this stage. But just in terms of financial figures, that's a huge saving already. It goes into a bit more detail on what McCarthy was on and what Stephen Kenny will be on. Basically, the difference there per annum is 1.2 million against 540,000, and that's reflected down the pyramid as well with the international management team staffs. So from a financial point of view, it's really kind of getting back to a sense of normality after all the excess of getting Trapp in, getting O'Neill in, the management teams that were there. Very much more in keeping with what you'd imagine an Irish manager should be earning. On the football point of view then as well, it makes sense as well. So I think this kind of, it ticks both boxes.
Yeah, McCarthy, they write in that piece on the front page of the Sunday Times, annual salary of 1.2 million, while Kenny will be paid 540,000. McCarthy's assistant, Terry Connor, was on €243,000. Robbie Keane was on about 250,000. The FAI hopes to have the entire wage of Stephen Kenny's backroom team, including an assistant and goalkeeping coach, limited to €250,000 wage cuts linked to the COVID-19 pandemic imposed on FAI staff last week. And Philip Quinn takes that angle on the finances on the back page of the Mail. They quote his interview with FAI TV where he says he was hugely disappointed to be departing as Irish manager. Quinn writes that he could be in line for a further €1 million bonus should the team he leaves go on to qualify for the Euro finals. That was in his contract. Now, Gary Doyle, as Nathan mentioned just before the ad break there, is reporting that perhaps that €1 million bonus would be shared between Kenny and Mick McCarthy. That is all subject to confirmation. But Quinn writes, McCarthy will have earned around 3.2 million for 10 games as manager, potentially a staggering 320,000 per match if you divide it up that way. That's assuming he's paid up until the end of his contract in July. In effect, and this is a crazy thing to say, Mary, I know, but really for Mick McCarthy, this is not about the money. He's been managing since the mid-90s regularly. I'm sure he has more than enough to see him out to the end of his days, even though we are talking about these huge sums. For him, I'm sure it's the disappointment of not getting to finish on a high with the team, potentially, to get to a European Championships.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I mean, Mick McCarthy is 61 years of age. He's had a long career as a player, obviously. He's had 2 spells in charge of Ireland. I was interested in Daniel MacDonald article in the Irish Sunday Independent today, where he spoke about quoting Mick McCarthy, saying that he was happy that the decision gave everybody clarity, but it was bittersweet. I think for Mick McCarthy, it runs deeper than money. I think at this stage, at 61 years of age, he's made his fortune. But it's interesting that, the amount of coverage that it has got in the short time that the writers across all the newspapers had to get the articles put to paper today. But I thought Daniel MacDonald's article and Paul Rowan's article in the Times were really good articles and really gave us a sense of maybe, where the situation has emerged from, and maybe give us a kind of that bit of hope towards Stephen Kenny and the under-21s, the way they have been playing free-flowing football, that maybe he might remain steadfast to his own beliefs and bring that to the senior team, because I think the genuine supporter out there is looking for that type of that type of football that the under-21s have been so brilliantly displaying, all being taking into account senior international football is a different kettle of fish altogether.
Brendan, in Daniel MacDonald's piece that Mary mentions there, he writes, it's understood that the FAI ultimately concluded that in this new era for the association, it was important to go by the book. And then he quotes a source who says, what you want is to be straight and upfront with people. It was a hard call, but the right call. From a reputational point of view, it wouldn't look well. And I suppose when that source says it wouldn't look well, I presume he or she means it wouldn't look well if we started ignoring the letter of the contracts and meddling around into the sphere of some kind of, back channel deal and, you know, whose moral right is it to get into the Euros, they decided ultimately, and I think particularly once the June date for the Slovakia game was moved into Stephen Kenny's tenure, and it must be stated that Mick McCarthy has not earned this playoff. If Ireland had finished last in the group, they would still have this playoff. It is a legacy of the Nations League and Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane's time. So it's not like finishing third has got Mick and the team into this playoff. That was happening regardless. And once we went from June, post-August 1st, into post-August 1st, Stephen Kenny's tenure, the decision was probably that bit easier. And the decision to, as the source who talked to Dan McDonnell said, to just go straight down the line, up front with people, you know, this is as clear as could be.
It's literally a black and white issue. I think at one point in Dan's piece, he says the contracts of the two managers were clearly date bound.
Yeah.
So everything else is just conjecture, wishful thinking, whether or not you think Mick McCarthy should have got the opportunity to take Ireland to Euro 2021 as it is now, or whether you're in the Stephen Kenny camp, get him in and give him as much time with his feet under the table as possible. It's absolutely immaterial. And again, we've mentioned already the backstory with everything that's happening with the FAI at the moment. How could they not look at it in any other way and just say, regardless of any other debate or arguments that were done by teleconference call this week, it's very simple. As soon as somebody says, lads, look at the two contracts, it is in black and white here, and we of all people are in no position to actually kind of cut around corners or dig deeper into anything here. This is how it states. And as you mentioned as well, Joe, I mean, the fact that Ireland are in this playoff semi-final against Slovakia is down to, frankly, an appalling system in UEFA, where our terrible performance in the Nations League still gets us this back channel into a possible major tournament. We mentioned briefly the footballing side of it at the start, and Mary mentioned the football that Stephen Kenny's under-21s are playing. You know, the ball stats of Mick McCarthy's Ireland in his 16 months in charge are 1-3, 2 against Gibraltar, 1 against Georgia, 8 games, 7 goals. Now, there are a few little pointers that you can make to that. I mean, he jumped straight into a qualifying campaign. He didn't have any friendlies at all to kind of, you know, bet himself back in. And again, that's another reason why maybe in a purely footballing sense that this could be good for Stephen Kenny and for the Republic of Ireland. A lot of conjecture still about when this playoff will actually be played. A few of the lads writing in the paper today are saying that could go back to February or March, that UEFA will be more amenable to having the big guns out for the Nations League in the autumn. So automatically that might give Stephen Kenny and his new management team games against Bulgaria and Finland at the very least to try out a few things. And as we just mentioned, the Nations League is so bonkers a tournament that who knows, maybe they could lose those games again, still have a back door down to something down the line. So it's a win-win for me.
You suspect the FAI probably have their channels in UEFA and have heard through the grapevine that the playoff against Slovakia will be put back to March. Now, what happens to the World Cup qualifiers? I don't know. I mean, they have a bit of wiggle room in the calendar, given that it's December 2022 when the World Cup is due to happen. Anybody who is pretending to be certain about anything in the current situation is, frankly, not telling the truth. So we just don't know where that's going to go. And I guess, Mary, one of the key points, and it's in Dan's piece, is that this is legally clear, because a couple of weeks ago when we were first talking about this, we knew Stephen Kenny's contract was clear, i.e. 1st of August. And there was definitely some concrete information that Mick McCarthy's contract had a date in it. But we weren't sure if it may have also included until the end of the European campaign, which may have muddied the waters somewhat. But once it was legally clear, then that made the decision very straightforward.
Yeah, just I suppose outlines to everybody that, you know, this is big business as well, and there's legalities to it. Look, obviously from a supporter point of view and from a fan point of view, you know, you want your country to succeed, and this type of sideshow distraction is gone now. You know, there's clarity there. I think everybody will appreciate that. But 31st of July was the cut-off date. It was obviously clear in the contract as well, and you know the decision was taken by the FAI. And in the same paper, actually, Eamon Sweedy's article on the McCarthy Kenny, we'll say, saga, he speaks that it was surprising and entirely predictable regarding the FAI decision. But then he speaks that, you know, McCarthy leaving is kind of a testament to the last vestiges of the John Delaney era. And I think, you know, the FAI must be credited on making this swift decision. As I said, I have no doubt that Mick McCarthy is disappointed to be leaving on the note he's left. I think there's clarity there now. We just need to move on with it, and I, for one, will be watching with bated breath to see how we get on.
Yeah, certainly the football Stephen Kenny has managed over the past, 20-odd years has suggested that we hopefully are in for some interesting times with Ireland. Damien Duff now officially part of his backroom team, if you're just tuning in, as is Keith Andrews. Alan Kelly, goalkeeping coach. Jim Crawford stays with the under-21s, and John O'Shea comes in to assist him. That was the official dispatch from the FAI in the last hour. And Mary, just to give people a sense who won't have all the papers today, we will finish off the McCarthy-Kenny situation. I wouldn't have said reading everything there's any great sense of this is the wrong decision or necessarily this is the right decision. Like Eamon Sweeney makes the point that the FAI have acted with unusual decisiveness to usher in the age of Stephen Kenny. I see John Brennan makes the point in the Sunday World that McCarthy was encouraged to go, and having thought about it, he went. And there's a few bits and pieces about the finances which we've touched on. But in the main, I think Mick McCarthy and the very, very classy, dignified, not surprisingly, interview he gave to FAI TV, the way he is elected to depart the scene has made this far easier on the FAI, far easier on Stephen Kenny, and not led to a couple of days of backbiting and recrimination, and this is no way to treat an Irish legend and all that kind of stuff. Instead, I think he's taken the higher road, not surprisingly.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's a kind of a testament to the man, and I think, it does make the road a lot smoother, and it allows Stephen to start straight away without having to, I suppose, deal with any acrimony. I think also it's important to remember that this is less than 24 hours old as well. I think, he broke it yesterday evening around 4 p.m. So people are reacting now. I think in a couple of days people might respond differently, but I think absolutely Mick McCarthy's reaction to this has been key, because that has allowed the FAI and for Stephen to actually not have to deal with a situation today where they're probably having to defend their decision. Obviously, there's contractual arrangements, but I think the key to this has been Mick McCarthy's reaction, and I think it's for the betterment of Irish football. And I'd like to think when Mick was a player and his 2 spells as manager, over 78 games for the country as manager, I think, it shows that he's at the heart of it. Ireland was at his heart, and I think that's important. Yes,
and a final word, Brendan, on it before we move on. Of course, we could be sat here potentially in September, and Stephen Kenny's first game in charge is against Slovakia, and it mightn't go well, and it will be easy to say, well, was this the best preparation for a huge game like that? But from this vantage point, and it's only at this vantage point that the FAI can make their decisions, it would seem like it has generally been accepted, it is clear-cut, this is not going to rebound massively on them.
Yeah, and you made the point earlier, Joe, that you'd imagine the people in the FAI have their contacts in UEFA, and that they would be pretty confident that we're not going to see that playoff game this side of Christmas. And just finally, like, one point that struck me, and I'm not saying it had anything to do with Mick's reaction to the situation, but if you look at it from Mick's point of view, we still don't know when that game is going to be on. That could have been on next March for all we know. So you could be waiting 11 months for one game, and you lose in Bratislava or whatever it is, you're done. So flip that another way. We still don't know where the domestic season in the UK or anywhere else is going to go. But if Mick McCarthy is done now, he is, as I saw a quote somewhere in the papers today, he's eager to get back into management. And if we saw anything from the Martin O'Neill situation when that went south so quickly at the end of his time in charge, it didn't do Martin O'Neill any harm whatsoever in getting another go at English club football with Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
So I think, it'd be interesting to see, does Mick have the same, how would I put it, the same advocates in the English media as Martin O'Neill did? But he's a guy with a huge track record, as Mary said earlier, and this now places him in a position where he's available for employment again, having, even though, like you said, because of the Nations League, having taken Ireland to a de facto playoff semi-final.
Yeah,